Hi, so I recently shipped the video game InFlux Redux, which is a remake of my 2013 puzzle game InFlux. It looks like this, and you can buy it on Steam, and it's getting pretty well received, although it's not selling that well. I thought it would be cool to do a bit of a comparison between the graphics and whatever else in the original game to the remake. So I managed to get the editor working for the old game, and here we are. This is what it looked like in Unreal Engine 3, and side by side I've got the new editor going, which is Unreal Engine 5. The project started out on UE4, and then for a long time I thought that was how it was going to ship, and it took so long remaking it that it's UE5 now. So this is the beach that you start out on in the game, and I guess I should say that this, to the degree that it's possible to spoil this game, this is going to have spoilers. But so this is the beach that you start out on, and it's pretty basic. And in the remake, it's pretty advanced. So what to say about this? This is a little bit interesting in that the ground here. This is on Unreal Engine 3 or UDK. The ground here, the terrain, is made using Unreal Engine 3's. I think it must be its first terrain system, its original terrain system, which is pre-landscape. After this level, everything is landscape, which is, at the time, was the fancy new terrain system in Unreal. It would have been like 2012. And as a result, if you play Influx, not the remake, but the original, on Steam, and then you're on this level and you alt tab out, when you come back, the terrain is just completely mangled in this level only, and there was nothing I could do about it. There are a number of issues that we ran into in Influx that we couldn't change because UDK, which was the publicly available distribution of UE3, didn't give you access to native code to the C++, so you had Unreal Script and you had whatever you could do in the editor, but there were certain things you couldn't change, and one of them was this is a rolling ball game, right? And there was a cap on the max angular velocity of any object in Unreal. And this would have been just a simple variable that you could access if you had the C++, and we didn't. So even if it was possible to access it via Unreal Script, we didn't know what it was called, and there was no way to look that up. So in our ball rolling game, the ball doesn't really roll as such. It can't spin fast enough, so it's just linear forces being applied to it. And you can tell it doesn't feel like it's rolling in the original. Whereas in the remake, it totally does, because we were just able to crank that up. It's just a lot. There are a lot of weird things like that as a result of not having source code access. In the remake, right? So let's compare just a random asset. This rock in the original was made by a guy called Brendan McCormack, and he just, he made these for his portfolio, I think, and he just let us use them. But they're pretty lo-fi, but they're nice. I had done some stuff in the shader to let the sand on top not stretch with the rock, and a ton of these assets, a ton of these rocks are just, it's 90% of what the entire world, like every level, is almost made out of. It's just a bunch of scaled rocks, and sometimes I do stuff on the material to make that not look as bad, and other times I don't. To be honest, by 2013 standards, which is when this came out, this is pretty good for an indie game. Definitely all the reviews were saying, these are amazing graphics for an indie game. But even a few years later, you're like, that's not super hot. So on the remake, it is the same base mesh, but I basically I pulled this into, I never actually took this into Maya or anything. I always used modeling tools that were available inside the editor. So I sort of subdivided it, tessellated it. I swapped the material out for a Megascan. Let me just adjust the exposure here so that you can see it better. Oops. So Quixel Megascan materials are on here, and there's 3 of them in total. There's the sand on the top, which is, again, blended into just on the top, using vertex color. In the original, it's using a mask that's particular to the rock, but in this, it's vertex color. And so when I just applied a Megascan to the rest of the rock, obviously that didn't look too good. So what I did was, in the absence of a curvature map or something, I vertex painted in all of the cavities, and we actually switched to a different Megascan material in the parts that would be gathering moss or something. Then later, once nanite was a thing in UE5, I used the modeling tools in the editor to use the displace function to just sort of use the Megascan's height map to pull in and various details and push out various verts, and you get quite a lot of definition. I was going to use nanite tessellation on these to add even more, but it just didn't feel worth it when I tried it. It looked pretty cool, but I wanted to use nanite tessellation on the ground, which I did, to get these nice little rocks. But and that's totally worth it. But I didn't want it to be that if you turned that on, you'd also get every single wall in the game having that same amount of extra detail when it was not as visually apparent there. So yeah, what else is to say about this? The sky here was basically just a photo of the sky that I found on textures.com or something like that, and I overlaid some stars that are tiling, which twinkle a bit. Actually, in the remake, the sky is less dynamic than that. I felt like I just wasn't getting anything out of the stars or any panning clouds or something that I had initially. And at one point, I was trying to put this to switch, and I baked whatever dynamism I did have down into a texture, and then I just ended up rolling that out across the PC version as well because it was cheaper and it looked kind of the same. The background here has had a little bit of work. It's actually this. I think that I might have done this by mistake, but initially I had this card here that was also a textures.com texture that sort of implies a mountainous landscape. But when I ported the map over to UE4, which was initially with no materials, I think I just assumed those cards were supposed to be tree cards, and I just used a tree card, which again were these ones anyway are straight from InFlux as well, another textures.com texture, and yeah. So another benefit that I'm really getting from UE4 over UE5 over here is there's a third-party plugin called Screen Space Fog Scattering, I think, and what you get there is that things appear to be slightly blurring when you're looking at them through fog, and that adds a really subtle but really nice effect to it. Plus the fog is just better here. So originally I had, for a long time, I guess a couple of years, I was only working on this on like some weekends. I had ported the whole game from UE3 to UE4, and it was kind of ready to go, but it was just the original art, and it just looked better because it was in UE4. And that was a substantial improvement, and the whole game was less janky because I had to rewrite all of the code and blueprint that used to be in either Unreal Script or Kismet. And after a while, I meant to ship that, and I made a trailer for it and everything, and I came back and I was like, that's not remastered enough, and that happened another 2 or 3 times to end up with what we have here. I should talk about the water here. This is the water in the UE5 version is using a plugin called Fluid Flux, which you can find on a marketplace, and it's sort of a big deal of a plugin. People love this thing. Look at these beautiful waves. So I can't super take credit for it, but it's pretty great. I think they also used it in that new Hellblade game. It's just really good water, and it's quite tweakable. And the original did also have water that you could... I should show you actually this if I play here... Hang on, that's not going to work. Give it a minute. Yeah, there is an issue that I really should have fixed, but I've just been working around, where you have to spawn up in the air in this level. So let's see. Play from here. Because I haven't run this in a while. Yeah, so it's rippling really nicely as we're rolling through it, floating in it a little bit, and it just looks great. Whereas, and I don't think I can play an editor on here because I have the maps opening but not the game compiled. This also ripples when you move through it, this water, but it's just using something called Fluid Surface Actor, which was built into UE3 and is pretty limited but perfect for stuff like this. You can actually see it in Batman Arkham Asylum as well. Anytime you move into some water and it ripples, that's Fluid Surface Actor. Alright, I'll move on to a different level. Let's see. I'll load it over here too. On the UE5 side, I have my own little toolbar buttons, and this one just shows me like every level that ships with the game, so I don't have to dig through folders. And it could take a while for this to open on the UE3 side because I haven't opened it in like 5 years. So the process for actually porting these maps over was sort of interesting. If you're into things like this, there was no good port process for any asset from UE3 into UE4. It was a completely different package system, and what I ended up doing was I either asked a guy to do this, or I just tracked a guy down who happened to be doing this. He'd made a program where you could paste out actors from a level in this isn't right, from a level in UE3 and just paste them into the editor in UE4, and they would be in the right positions. If it was a static mesh, it wouldn't have its mesh, but and the materials you had to absolutely do by yourself. But the important thing was just getting objects into a new map in the new engine in the right spots. So it gave you something to work from. That would have been the big deal breaker if we hadn't been able to just get the maps over in some form. And yeah, it was difficult. That was for the meshes. You had to export every mesh from UE3 individually. There was no bulk export, and I don't think I even had source meshes for most of these things. Materials, again, you had to just painstakingly recreate them yourself in the new editor. Textures you had to port over. And yeah, it was a tremendous amount of fix-up just to get any of these levels working. Then when it came to level scripting, that wouldn't come over at all. Kismet was how you did that in UE3. And in UE4, that doesn't exist. You have level blueprint, but to be honest, it's really it was a good thing that it wasn't, because it forced me to actually recreate all of the sort of mechanics in a way that makes sense. I'll get into that a little bit when I open a puzzle. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be making this video, but hopefully this is interesting to somebody. So here's the same area. It's a bit of a more detailed area in UE3 and UE5, and you can also see that I made some edits here. So this is the first puzzle that you solve. You arise out of this sort of elevator, out into this clearing. In the original, you don't really see the elevator move, so you sort of just have to assume that's what happened, but in the remake, I actually made it move up. And when you roll out of here, every puzzle that you solve in the game has one of these sort of big columns of light that comes out of it afterwards. And it always bugged me when I went back after I finished InFlux that this one didn't. It didn't make any sense. And it's really easy once you finish this puzzle to just not happen to look behind you and see this column of light shoot up into the sky. So I thought I sort of needed to teach that that's a thing earlier. So once you leave this, you hit this trigger, and while you're, with any luck, looking at this big obvious structure, it will shoot up the first beam of light that you see. And I added this campfire here because I kind of wanted to imagine that the people who live here, maybe, they don't know what this is, but it's something, and will at least hang out under it sometimes. Let's see. So as you come down here, I'm not sure where they are in the UE3 version, but they do exist in the shipped game. There are a bunch of boulders here that you have to push out of your way, and those were added because the beach intro teaches you how to push and pull objects, and then you're required to do that in the puzzle. But I kept noticing that when a player learned how to push and pull on the beach, went into the puzzle and had to use push and pull, and then they came out here, they had immediately forgotten about push and pull unless you required them to do it again immediately. Something about changing the setting in that way, it sometimes even meant that they would get into the next puzzle and not realize that they could do it. Or they would just, if I required them to push and pull into the overworld later, they just associated that with the puzzles, even though they learned it on the beach. Anyway, for the same reason I put another one just here, just for the fun of pushing it off the edge if you want to. That's only in the remake. And I guess this reminds me that the entire... I wanted this vista, but the actual reason that there's a big drop-off here is because later on, players kept wondering if there was fall damage, and I couldn't think of a better way to teach that there isn't fall damage without just letting you roll off the edge, and that's your only option. And when you fall from a height like this, and there is no negative consequence at all, now there's no fall damage, and that seemed to get the idea across pretty well. So in the remake, there's a ladder here. I'm not really sure why I did this. I guess just otherwise there's no way they could have got up here to make the campfire. But in general, I used the ladders as a way to say, look up, I guess, which is a trick that I sort of learned from Portal. There's no ladders in Portal, except there is one that if you try to climb it, it breaks. But by then you've looked up and you know you've done what you wanted them to do, and you know where you're trying to go. So I use those a fair bit to make somebody look up. The only downside is sometimes, even though you're a ball, somebody thinks you're going to be able to climb a ladder, and they just keep boosting at the ladder. And I've even seen somebody ricochet off the ladder in such a way that they did get where they were going, and now they just think that's a system, and that they should always boost the ladder. But you know, whatever. It wasn't worth fixing to me. But that was a consideration in making this remake. To be honest, InFlux is not really my kind of game. So coming back to it, there are a lot of things that like I kind of wanted to change because I would like it more. But the people who liked InFlux, they're not that many of them, but they love it a lot, and it really hit the spot for some people. And I'm like, I don't know, as well as being a scope concern where I don't want to do anything too major because I'll make work for myself. It's also I could break something that I didn't realize was important to someone. So. Yeah, that was always a consideration whenever especially in a puzzle. This portal effect is new, and it's actually one of the final things that I did. The original game, I can't show it again, but when you put your fireflies into this receptacle, it sort of bulges out in 3D because it's fluid surface actor again. And I didn't get that effect in on this, but I got something that I kind of like more. What I'd always imagined was that this would be... There is a loading screen in the Settlers 2 that shows a portal that looks just like this, and I'm happy that I finally got it to look like that. Let's see. I might as well open up a puzzle, since that's where you would be up to if this was the game. Right, so this is the first puzzle in the game. Compiling some shaders over here. And it's obviously a lot prettier in the new one. But what I wanted to show in this in particular was that the way that the puzzles were built in UE3, because I was not a programmer at the time and I kind of had no idea what I was doing, was all in Kismet. And this is what Kismet looks like. It's the visual scripting language of UE3. And it's very much predicated on the idea of a level. Like, the level owns all of this script. There's no way to make an actor in this. There's no way to make a class. And it's a horrible mess. But it felt pretty amazing at the time. I was coming from the Source engine where you didn't have any visual scripting thing. You had sort of an input-output system that I now realize was more amazing than I gave it credit for, and I've remade it. But this did sort of let you do a lot more without a programmer. However, it does mean that every puzzle, even though these all, throughout the game, they work in pretty much the exact same way, the code, such as it is for that, is all completely duplicated. I don't think I can even show these because a lot of these references are broken. I'll give it a go. I'll open this matinee, and with any luck... Nope, this is not the right one. Let's see. Oh man, some of this stuff is old. Flashback to years earlier, when I first started InFlux, it was nothing but the puzzle rooms, and I've got all these leftover animations for moving them around because it was like if you'd solve one puzzle and then the whole side of it would come off and move through space to another puzzle, which once you entered it, the other one would slide away. It was pretty cool for a minute there, but people got puzzle fatigue, and so I thought you have to be able to go to an overworld in between maps. And thus the entire rest of the game happened. Let's see. Here we go. So these puzzles rotate, and that's what this looks like in UE3. The bad part about that is that every single button is its own distinct lump of code, which means you can have a bug like a button in a particular puzzle gets stuck and doesn't come back up when you roll off of it, and then you have to go and fix that. So it's a lot more bug prone, it's a lot more issue prone, whereas the buttons in InFlux Redux are just an actor, as it should be, that you can drag into a level, and you can hook it up to anything, not just a rotating room or anything like that. It's not a super clean blueprint, but the point is all of this code is in one place and it's never duplicated. So the equivalent to what Kismet is these days would be using the level blueprint, which a lot of people will sort of say you shouldn't do. But it's not too bad. I mean, you just got to make sure you're not doing what I was doing in InFlux, and you'll be sweet. So yeah, again, we have a lot of HDification treatment going on here. These tiles still use the original texture when you're far away, but when you get closer, they go to, you guessed it, a Quixel Megascan of some concrete. So you can actually see that a lot of this wear is just fading out when I get close. It's not soon noticeable in game. When you are far away, that wear is actually a photo that I took of the side of the museum in Brisbane, the Queensland, maybe it was the Art Gallery, the Queensland Art Gallery, or QUAG. You'll know what I'm talking about if you've ever been there. It looks like that. It looks good. Alright. I might fast forward, because this video could take all day, to the caves. And I apologize if this is not interesting, but deal with it, I guess. Let's see. So the caves, I think, was the first map that I actually started out using the landscape system for. And being from the source engine, I was quite disappointed that I couldn't easily make caves, but a height map terrain is like that. So here, all of the walls are just meshes. And my buddy Matt Pearson made the meshes. And I don't know, this is still a pretty nice looking level in the original, but I feel like it's a lot nicer in the remake. We've got some nice water flowing around. It adds a little bit of gameplay interest because this water will push the ball, so you've got to sort of like edge around or boost through it. And yeah, the same thing here. This is sort of just an empty room with a lake in it in the original. At the time, I definitely felt like just rolling through this water and seeing it ripple was enough of a reward for being here at all. But yeah, just this waterfall is completely new. These light shafts were just an incredible feature at the time, and if you play UE3 games from around this time, like 2012, you're going to see a lot of these light shafts. Batman Arkham City uses them heavily, and you won't see them as much in UE4 because, or UE5 games, because going to the deferred renderer meant you couldn't do this just on any old light. It was only on the sun. So if you ever hear someone talking about the Unreal Engine look, I don't think it's a thing really, but occasionally you do get something like that it's just, yep, everyone's fucking crazy about these light shafts. We use nanite tessellation on the ground here to get those 3D pebbles, which looks pretty great. Something that I always wished I could do on InFlux, but I didn't know how to, and I'm still not convinced I would have been able to on UDK, was just let you roll along the ground and it makes a dint in the ground, like it makes a trail. That works in Redux, and it feels really nice. Over here is the first, oh god, that's blurry. So this is supposed to be, you're looking out on the ocean floor. You've taken a puzzle and you've fallen down a hole, and now you're in some sort of subterranean cave system that looks out on the ocean. As you can see in the original, it really doesn't look like the ocean, and in fact, that's why there's a whale there. The reason that this whale, who is important to the story, exists is because I had this under the sea bit, and I think Matt Pearson, who was the main artist on the game, just thought of, I guess, put a whale there then. So you come here and you get to see him go past. And in the remake, I was able to get a bunch of mega scans of coral and seagrasses and some fish and bubbles, and really make it actually look like it's under the sea. Even so, and even though I put this sort of blocker here with a jump to slow the player down enough that they would notice the whale, a lot of players do not. He's called Hank the Humpback, by the way, and he has a scar. And the reason he has a massive scar was because we were worried that when you saw him here, and then you saw him over here through this other window, you might think it was two different whales. And in hindsight, it's sort of silly as a fix because you just cannot notice the scar. And if you don't know a lot about humpback whales, you might just think that's part of it for all you get to see of it. But hey, all right. So again, the water is just a lot nicer in the remake. This level's mostly the same, I suppose. Here's something sort of interesting. For a while, we wanted this game to be sort of a Metroidvania, and I scoped it back because, in hindsight, it's laughably out of scope for what we were doing. I mean, a lot of this game is the way that it is, even just genre-wise, because I knew that I didn't know how to code. So I wanted something that I could do with my limited skill set. I'm mostly in the level editor. I'll jump into Unreal Script to do things that are pretty simple, but ultimately it's a physically simulated ball because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to write good controls, so I'll just go with physics. One of the things that you were going to be able to unlock as an ability was a grapple. Looks like the grapple point is gone, but that's why this stalagmite is here. You were going to learn the grapple in this glass house and then grapple across certain gaps. I ended up just adding slopes, and you would use the boost to get around. But yeah, there were a lot of places that were made with the grapple in mind, and we just couldn't get it quite good enough. These days, I still love grapples, and these days I have made a very good grapple, but it's still not in the game. Rip. So yeah, there's no grapple. And in fact, the early level that I was on, the sort of jungly looking one, you can really tell if you look that was designed as a sort of Metroidvania hub. There are a lot of ways that you could backtrack. And I just had to close up a bunch of stuff so I could still use the level, which was a shame. But I don't know. There's no way I would have shipped it if I had to do that. Once again, I've taken the opportunity to add pretty waterfalls that were not in the original. Here's something else that wasn't in the original, and so I don't really know why I had this ledge up here in the original. But there's a new type of firefly that if you collect it, you unlock some concept art in the menu. That would have been nice to have in the original as well. Once again, this still really doesn't look like Under the Sea, but I do have this light function here that sort of pretends to be caustics. So, yeah, that works out. I think for the rest of the video, I will just go through the other major outdoor areas. Maybe not even all of them. What's next? The valley, I think. Where is that? It's in its own folder. Cool. I've already mentioned most other people, but I should probably shout out the coder who taught me what code I did use on this game. That was Jorn van der Beek, who is just a cool Dutch guy I knew from the internet, and he was super helpful to the project in a lot of ways. He actually paid for me to go out to Seattle to attend PAX, where we sort of promoted the game a bit, and that was incredibly valuable. Just a great guy. So this is the valley, and this is the first of the chapters that I made after getting funding, which is, I guess, why it's a little bit scopier. But so what happened was I applied for funding from Film Victoria, which is in the state of Australia that I live in. There is this group, part of the state government, who will fund you to make a video game if you can sort of convince them that you're going to be able to do it. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it was like 30 grand, but I was on the dole at the time, so it was a hell of a lot for me. And so intent was I on getting this funding, because I was really desperate for money, that it wasn't clear to me how much of a pitch I needed, but I decided I was just going to sort of make a design document, which I had never had before, and write down exactly what every chapter was going to be and have sketches of every level and an exact number of puzzles that were going to show up in them and everything. And it's good that I did that, because even though I didn't feel like I need that, and I still kind of don't think design documents are usually the go, doing it as a way to sort of lie to somebody that I knew what the hell I was doing was was really good because I then did just like, I'd set myself, here's what the end of the game is, and I was able to color in all the way through there. So, after that, it was really just following through on the plan. So, as well as obviously getting the money itself was really good, so was just being forced to come up with a plan. And yeah, surprisingly, I stuck to the plan, which is always one of my key pieces of game advice to people. Game dev advice is stick to the plan. The plan doesn't have to be good. You do have to stick to it to a reasonable sort of degree. I added these bridges in the remake. These are just using Quixel Megascans and then gluing a bunch of those together and using a spline mesh actor to spline them across. And then merging that so that it's not expensive to render. The part of this that's interesting, I suppose, if there is one, is that collision is obviously going to be iffy with that. Because if you go per poly collision on this, that's a lot of polys. We're going to bounce off of it, even if you simplify it a lot. So what I did was also separately have sort of just a flat plane mesh that I splined across as the collision, and that's what you see here as a pink sort of player clip mesh. So the bridge does have collision so that you can hit the struts, but the thing that you actually collide with as you roll over it is just a plane that has been splined. And as well as that, so the ball, this is hard to describe, the ball itself rolls along the top, but because it's rolling on this pink thing, that leaves a big gap between it and the bridge underneath. So I do a complex trace down to find the actual spot where the ball should appear to be sitting on the bridge, and then I just purely visually offset the ball downwards so that it's just rolling along to stop this translucent pink thing, but it appears to be adhering to every sort of nook and cranny in the bridge. Originally I did that using a shader, using world position offset, but there were a few cases that didn't handle, so I ended up doing it just as sort of basically the ball that you're looking at on screen is never the one that's actually colliding. So there's another one layered on top of that just has a height offset on it. Let's see. This is all fluid flux again, and it took a while to get this simulation right, but it's nice. It's much nicer water physics and everything than the original game had. These trees actually are completely different, you might notice. These were all, in the original, they were made by a dude called Alex McDonald, and including these nice pine trees, which I was pretty psyched with at the time. But they were not sort of, I mean, you can see them, they're not 2024 trees. So these ones are from the marketplace, and they're about the same type of tree, but there were certain ones that were not the right shape, where I had a really particular tree shape that I needed. And in those cases, I used a spline mesh again or a warp modifier with the modeling tools or something to get the right shape. So there are a lot of hacks going on in making this decent. These tree cards are an interesting case because, I mean, they're just not very good in the original. And I just ended up finding a much better photo source for them, and yeah, they're just nicer. They use dither temporal AA. I didn't want to have translucency for all of this, partly because of translucency sorting issues when you have a bunch of stacked cards. So yeah, these are masked but dithered, which you can kind of tell. The trick there is to have it skip the dither entirely in the material if the result would have been close enough to 1 or 0. Because you don't want to just end up with a bunch of 0 pixels that are still dithered. Cool, so that's pretty in the weeds. Another person I could give a shout out to, with regards the whale, who is not here, but I will open the forest soon and you'll see the whale. If you've read The Final Hours of Half-Life Alyx, you will have seen a full page macro shot essentially of the face of an animator called James Benson, who was great. He also did, if anyone remembers these TF2 dance videos a long time ago, yeah, they're great. So James is a friend of mine, and way back before he worked at Valve, I think even before he was working on Ori and the Blind Forest, he made the animations for the whale, or most of the animations for the whale in InFlux. And before that, he did like clothesline animations for a Half-Life 2 mod that I did. Yeah, so those are super good. And honestly, like, it's a huge part of why people coming away from InFlux feeling like there was a story to talk about at all. So I'm very grateful for that. Let's see. So here's the forest, and it's by far the most graphically intensive part of both games. You do in the shipped version of Redux tend to drop like some amount of frames here that I'm not super happy with. So I do still intend to optimize it down a bit. But actually in the Redux we have way fewer trees here. This is a sort of a stupendous amount of trees. The trees in Redux are just larger. They're off the marketplace, and so I made a tool to thin them out. I didn't want to do this manually, so I made an editor utility widget that sort of removed every like third tree and any trees that were overlapping other trees, and that got some costs down pretty good. The reason I was just talking about the whale is he's over here. This is, spoilers, the part where you find that the whale is beached after you saved him from having previously beached him in the underground cave system. And he's in a different sublevel in the original, so I can't do a direct comparison. But I always, even in the Redux, something that I didn't get to do better was I wanted something better to push him back out to sea with than just pushing him. It's sort of inconsistent that you can push a thing this heavy, especially since you weren't able to do it earlier in the caves. So yeah, I don't know. I wanted to have something else, like maybe some element of a glass house that would still have a fan working on it, and you could blast him out to sea. But I couldn't think of anything that didn't end up making it seem like you were putting him at even greater risk. But you know, whatever. It's okay. You push him back out to sea, and then later he gives you a lift to the volcano, which is nice. I'm a big fan of how much better this. I can't preview it here, but this little area looks in the remake. Thanks, Quixel Megascans. It's not all Quixel Megascans, but quite a shocking amount of it is. Let's see. What else is notable here? This is all much the same, I suppose. The rope bridges were... I was never a super fan of these in the original, the way the ropes are sort of textured onto the planks. They are a bit nicer in the remake. It's again spline mesh antics and meshes from the marketplace. These huts were also redone. The roof is actually still the same. But this is again me sort of, okay, we've got a bunch of kind of, by today's standards, lousy planks. Let's just gonna put a bunch of high fidelity planks there, merge them all into a single mesh, and almost call it a day. It took a while to get right, but I don't know. I think it worked out. Let's see. This is a bit different. So this is another area that was going to be a grappleable thing originally, and I ended up with, once the grapple was removed, sort of this clumsy bit where you boost up this ramp, and then off this half pipe, and then get across. And it was like a 50-50 split between people for whom that worked perfectly immediately, and they're like, sick, I actually wish there was more stuff like this in the game, and people that couldn't get it to work at all and quit in frustration. Here I decided I just in general made more of the hot air vents that blast the ball around. So I blocked off these and require you to sort of jump off into, take a bit of a leap of faith, and then boost over to here, and sort of it feels a little more dangerous than it is. Once again, I am immensely grateful for Fluid Flux for this nice looking water. And that's where you get out of here. I think I'll skip the next map because it looks more or less like the original, and go to the interior of the volcano, because that one is interesting to me. Volcano interior, right. So this is probably one of the maps with the starkest difference between the remaster and the original. I think this looks really nice, or at least I'm very happy with how much nicer it looks than the original. It's not terrible in the original though. So this is making this pretty good use of light mass. One of the main differences graphically from between these two games is that Redux uses Nanite and Lumen. Nanite's not super relevant right now, I'm not sure why I said that. But it uses Lumen, so it's fully dynamic lighting and shadowing and AO and everything. Downside is you turn the graphics down and suddenly it doesn't look very good at all if you disable those things. But we're getting dynamic bounce light and everything. The original obviously didn't have that, so we have baked light, which if you want to see what the light maps look like, it's like that. But it does mean if you turn all the graphics down, you keep all this lighting detail, 90% of it. So this was one of the other things I couldn't do. I wasn't very good at coding, although I certainly learned some things over the course of this project. I also wasn't really any good at modeling. I made these little windows, but, look at them, they're not super great. And this, I think, was actually this ground here, because it's got holes in it. I couldn't do this as a height map terrain, and I have to match the windows. I did this in a modeling tool, which I had never done before, and I was pretty proud of how it came out. All of these caves, this was all me, baby. And I don't know, it still looks good in a remaster. An interesting nanite thing here is, like I mentioned, I'm using nanite to get all of these nanite tessellation, to get all of these all this pebble detail, but of course that meant that when you got up to this seam, it didn't match up where the window was, because all of this has height maps. What I ended up doing was using vertex color, painting into along the seams here where I didn't want any tessellation, and then in the material I say, don't do any nanite tessellation, where I've painted black, which was just all on these edges. So that's an interesting way to make that work. I guess a more typical use of that would be if you were making buildings that you wanted all the bricks on them to have nanite tessellation, but then that causes problems at the corners. You could vertex paint the corners, although at that point it's enough manual work that you probably just put a pillar there instead and hide it. Anyway, let's see. So I was able to improve these air vents a lot. Something that I always remember whenever this feels bitter, but there's something I always remember when I see this bit is there was a TV show called Good Game on Australian television who reviewed this game, and I guess they weren't able to pull the ball out of this vent, and they said that was just bad game design, and I was like, what are you talking about as bad game design? It's clearly a bug. But whatever, I fixed the bug 11 years later. So I reckon they should go again. Cool. So yeah, this is a nice little bit. Walking along here. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just really fond of this level. I guess I don't have that much to say about it, but it's hot. It's hot. Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic difference. The only thing that I do think is kind of communicated a little bit better is the orange of the lava in the original is a perfect match for the orange of the balls that you put into the goals in the puzzle rooms. Whereas this kind of just looks like lava. I feel like people probably still make the connection, but here it was extremely like, oh, the thing I'm doing in the puzzle has something to do with the volcano. I don't know. Can't win them all, but I'm very happy with how this Vista came out in the remake, because, I mean, this is what I was going for, but no, it really didn't land in the original. I don't know, people were happy with it. So yeah, I suppose that's probably all I would show. I'm sure I'm going to finish making this video and immediately think of a million other things, but yeah, that's the game. I guess I will actually open up the overworld map again just to show you a couple of things that I later referred to. Let's see. Both of these games, by the way, use the old level streaming system that was, I guess, must have been made for Gears of War or something. Maybe it predates that, but it's old, and it caused me a few problems in the remake because it's an older feature. It was core to like millions of games, but it's not used in Fortnite, so it doesn't get a ton of support. But basically, what that means is I have. Let me see. Where is the levels editor here? I have a persistent level with a list of maps that stream in and out. Both games use this and have sort of dozens of levels that get streamed in and out. And But I was able to do a much better job in the remake. Very often you would, I guess I kind of did it too much in the original. Each chunk of this whole map is a sub level. Let me see if I can remember how to show you that. Tools, view, edit. Surely browser windows. Here we go, levels. So yeah, so this is the whole first third of Influx has levels in here. And if I disable this one, like that's a sub level. That's a sub level. That's a sub level. And this was managed using volumes. And I guess in hindsight, like I actually don't think that I was saving much, memory or rendering by not just rendering this entire chunk at once, especially with the aggressive distance culling that you can see I'm doing. But yeah, I guess that's what I did. And the big downside of that was the loading was not fast. Like you could get here and you'd hit a volume that would stream the next chunk of level, and yeah, people talked about it. It was stuttery and it was lousy. But in the remake, this is all one level and doesn't seem to be an issue. So, oh well, live and learn. Of course, it was different back then as well. Like people's computers were different. I'm sort of just guessing that would have been any better. What I was going to show was that so at one point this when this was trying to be a Metroidvania, this cliff was connected by a land bridge all the way to this one. We had this nice arch. And this was just, I think this was connected to this. There were just a bunch of different ways you could go. There was going to be a grapple opportunity, I think, where you could go straight to this beach. Once you unlock the grapple, you'd boost sort of up here and then over here and then swing. And having gotten rid of that and decided it should be a linear progression of events, I had to kill the land bridge. This used to have a way through, I think. I started putting puzzles down that were sort of blocking progress in a way that they wouldn't have before when you could have done them in any order. A lot of things became sort of just stupid, useless hanging on things. Like, for instance, over here, you can go all the way up here and get a nice view of the next sort of part of the world, but you've come quite a long way for just a view. And it's just because that was going to be a way that you could go. For a while, I had a wall here, but then, I don't know, that felt weird too. So in the remake, I actually finally dealt with it and put a gate here that you have to pull this boulder to open it, but you can't get up there. But you use a ladder, hopefully make you look up. Okay, I guess I'll just follow this scaffolding around. Oh, nice view. And now I can get on the bridge and go around and pull the boulder. So it's still sort of a long way to go for just that, but it's an improvement, and there are a number of things that I've done that with that. Something that I was eager to add was the collectible art unlocks, because that sort of that makes there be a point to any of this. Like over here, you can sort of finish this puzzle, and then there's a semi-hidden beach you can get down to, and that's in Influx, but there's no point going down here. It's just exploration. But if I add the collectible concept art, now I can pretend that was the idea all along. Over here we added another one of these sort of boulder pull puzzles. I was quite happy to be able to just add a few more sort of mechanical encounters to this overworld, rather than just having you roll around and potentially be impatient for the next puzzle by the time you get there. That's a nicer vista than it used to be. This ladder was probably the one that was a mistake. This is a half pipe, but it's not clear enough that it is, so people just boost to this ladder. They get up here in the end, but I don't love it. Yeah, so anytime in this first third of the game that you find yourself on kind of a weird, long, nothing odyssey between puzzles. Not that people hate these bits, I'm being a bit overly critical, but yeah, that's what that is. It used to be a Metroidvania. This is actually the only skippable glass house in the game, and the reason for that is, again, it was a Metroidvania. This used to be open, and you could get through here, and you could go straight to this one, and I couldn't think of a decent way to like block this off, such that you had to do this glass house before you did that one, because I don't want to kill this nice view, and I don't want to put up just a fence. I thought of putting up just a big glass fence, but nah, it wouldn't have been good. So this is a skippable puzzle, and it's one of the nicer ones, I feel. But from what I've seen, most people do not skip it, so that's nice. Yeah. I guess I'll call it there. If you have any questions about any technical things, I'm sure I've overlooked a lot. But yeah, go for it. One thing that I do like about this game is that all of these levels are actually correctly situated in a big model of the island, and you get to see it at the end. Look down and the progress that you made as all these columns of light shoot up from the puzzles that you did in the correct places. And I'm kind of, I don't know, it's just one of those things, given that this was mainly made by one on the dole, stressed out 20-year-old, that something like that came together, I suppose. I think this game does a pretty good job of pretending to have been more directed and intentional than it was. Anyway, I worked on this remake sort of on and off for years, and I'm happy to have shipped it. I'm hoping to bring it to consoles as well. And yeah, so far it's 100% positive reviews on Steam. It's just not very many, is all. There's 70, I suppose, which, you know, it's a lot, I suppose, and it feels good, definitely. But I guess the amount, if you work on a game for this many years, and then it makes you an amount of money that is, you know, maybe a couple of months worth, it's you know, you just got to focus on the positive, which is that it's out at all, and that's what I'm doing, and I'm pretty happy with it. So thank you to everybody who played this and liked it, and especially the people who have sent such lovely fan mail over the years, and who enjoyed InFlux and got so much more out of it than I ever really expected anybody to. And obviously also thanks to the team that helped me make it in the first place, and the people who helped out with the remake as well. You're all in special thanks. Yeah, I'll call it there. Hope this is intriguing to people. Later.